what follows is part one of an interview I did with the late Doug Fry. Now, Doug was an air gunner with Bomber Command in the Second World War. He flew operationally with 15 Squadron on Stirlings during the Battle of the Ruhr period in 1943. And Doug was 18, 19-year-olds at the time he was on operations, and you get that sense of enthusiasm he had all through his training, the motivation for joining up, and then actually on the operations themselves. And he was in some of the most dramatic raids of the war, including the Hamburg raid in 1943. And then Doug goes on to describe the night in some detail, the night that he was shot down at the end of July 1943, coming down in enemy territory, very quickly captured. And then he talks with, you can sense some kind of a feeling of thanks and appreciation for the German civilians who take him in, take care of him, tend to his wounds, and eventually he ends up in hospital to be treated. Okay. Would you mind, just for the recording, just to say your name, please, and when you were born?
Yes. Okay. Is it
Yeah,
running now?
We're off and running. Yeah.
My name is Doug Fry, and I was born in Islington in London on 3rd of May 1924.
Okay. Was there a military background in your family at all?
No, none whatsoever.
Right. So.
None whatsoever.
Did you go to school in the Islington area? Did you stay there through the early years?
Yes.
So, if I'm correct, by the time war was declared in September 39, you were 15 years. Were you still at school at that point?
No, I'd left about. I went to work in about end of May 1939.
To do?
I went into as an office boy, of course,
right.
In the Marine Insurance Company.
Had you got an interest in flying at that point at all?
Yes, very interested in airplanes, making models, and joined the Air Defence Cadet Corps in '38 when it was formed after the Munich crisis, and of course that eventually became the ATC in 1941.
What was your inspiration for flying then? What
I don't know. I was just fascinated with aeroplanes as a youngster. And never seen one, of course, on the ground. Now and again, you hardly ever saw an aeroplane in the sky in those days. Yeah. But I was very interested, and then when I was old enough to get a bit of pocket money, I started making models. You
mentioned the Munich crisis there. So were you, as a young person, were you quite politically aware then of what was going on?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of us were, really, because it seems to me that after the Munich crisis, so obviously something was going to happen now. All the youngsters started joining things. The Army Cadets, or the Queen's Cadets, the Sea Scouts, you name it, and Territorial Army. If they were old enough, and I think that there was a great awareness of what was going on and what would be going on. And as I said, the Air Defence Cadet Corps was formed, and apparently overnight, once it was known it was formed, about 30,000 youngsters joined in that very, very short, in hours practically. And I was one of them. I joined the 9F Islington Squadron, and we had to buy our own uniforms, of course, and I managed to scrape up £6 a week towards that.
Yeah.
And we didn't really do much. We were affiliated to 54 Squadron, which was the fighter squadron at Hornchurch, and now and again a pilot flight lieutenant used to come and give us a chat and so on about various things, and we used to get somebody up from Hadley Page and give us a chat about what they were doing,
right.
Developing their aircraft and various things. So
you were very much into it then.
Absolutely.
You mentioned you're close to Hornchurch, so did you experience the Battle of Britain yourself?
Well, Islington's not close to Hornchurch, but we were within Islington, but was within the target area, if you like.
Yeah.
So there was always plenty of action going on during the raids.
Can you recall any specific incident during the Battle of Britain?
Not really, because we were on the periphery. Really, now and again you saw some action, but most of it, of course, was actually over Kent and the other areas around there.
So, how did you come about actually signing up for Aircrew?
Well, I wanted to. Everybody had to do something. Everybody was going into the forces anyway. Everybody registered. Everybody was going into the forces. But I wanted to get in. If I was going to have to do something, I wanted to fly. I wanted to get into the Air Force. So that's what I did. I volunteered for Aircrew. Had the selection board and medical. Passed all that. Usual drill. And had the interview afterwards when it was all over, and a couple of officers there, and one of them in the chair said, we can offer you training as an air gunner, which was brilliant, because really that's really what I wanted. I wasn't all that bothered about being a pilot. Most chaps wanted to be a pilot, especially a fighter pilot, but I didn't. I fancied the being an air gunner, because the big aircraft were coming on the stream, Stirling first of all, and because they had 2 specialist gunners, and I just fancied myself in that turret.
Can you recall the approximate date when you actually signed up and went for your interview, your initial
Yes,
selection?
December.
December
42.
December 1942.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're quite a way into the war then.
Yeah.
Would you say that your motivation to join it for Aircrew was just to fly, or was it to? Did you want to take up arms against the enemy? Was there
Yes, exactly that.
To go to war?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yes. Because people of my age, or thereabouts, Hitler came to power in 1933. I was 9, so from age 9 onwards, we'd grown up, and our fate was sealed, really, together with millions of others, because of what was happening in Germany. So we were fully aware. Even as youngsters like that, we were fully aware, because there's always bits and pieces in the paper, or if you went to the cinema in the newsreels, there was always these pictures of Germans marching about and hailing Hitler and all this stuff. So we grew up with it, really, didn't we? And the end was inevitable, it seems.
How did your parents feel about you joining up for Aircrew? Were they supportive?
Well, my mother was worried, of course. My father had died in 1934.
Right, okay.
My mother was worried, but she couldn't do much about it, really, I suppose. She knew I was interested in airplane. We had models hanging on the walls and stuff like that, so she knew where my interests were. So that it was a foregone conclusion, really.
Did you go to Lord's cricket ground to do your?
Yeah. What happened with air gunners and some also flight engineers, other bods, if they were given training as pilots, and the course was then pilot navigator bombing, a PNB course. So as an air, and they were given about 5, 6, 7 months before they were actually called up or actually went for training, whereas air gunners were direct entry, because they needed air gunners quickly because of as I say, the 4-engine bomb was coming on the stream, and they wanted 2 specialist gunners, so they wanted gunners quickly, and that's how it came about. So I had the one weekend, the Friday and Saturday, was the selection board and Aircrew medical, and then the following Monday week I reported to St John's Wood, the Aircrew receiving centre at St John's Wood. And we were only there. I got kitted out, hair shaved off, and stuff like that, and jabs and dentist and everything. And at the following weekend we were off up to Bridlington in Yorkshire.
Right.
For the number 14 ITW.
Okay.
So there was no messing about. We didn't. Some pods were at St John's Wood for 3 or 4 weeks or more, or a month. but we went straight through. Bump, bump.
And you under the impression that's because the 4-engine heavies were coming in.
No question.
There was a demand for air guns.
Absolutely, no question about that.
And you were quite content the fact you'd been selected.
Oh yes, I was fantastic. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do.
So ITU, if we can just go through your training then. So ITU at Bridlington. ITW,
yeah.
of course, yes.
Initial training wing.
Initial training wing. Did you get onto an aircraft there, or was that?
Oh no. It was strictly classroom stuff.
Right. So after ITW, what was the next step?
We went to air gunnery school then, which was I went up to a 2 gunnery school up at Dalcross near Inverness on the Moray Firth, and there we were flying Defiants, clapped out Defiants.
Really?
Yeah, and most of the pilots were Poles, sort of veterans of the Battle of Britain, and it was very hairy with them, I can tell you, because I hated it, and they wanted to get back killing Germans, you see. Purely and simply, counting our sprogs about, and so they did all sorts of things to get themselves transferred. Low flying up the Moray Firth, over Inverness, all that sort of stuff, you know, and flapping wings on the Moray Firth after the exercise. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it happened to me, and there was one accident there with low-flying aircraft after they finished their exercise. All around Dalcross was pine forest, timber forest, for the timber industry, and there were fire breaks down. And this particular pilot, he decided that he'd come right down low and fly through between the trees down these fire breaks. The inevitable happened, didn't it? And he hit a tree, bump. He was killed outright, of course, but the gunner fortunately was squeezed out. The engine came back and killed the pilot, and it squeezed the turret out. So, but that's the sort of thing that was liable to happen there. Yeah. And that was a 6 weeks course, and then we eventually got our brevet and our stripes, and got posted to, I think I had about three or 4 days leave, got posted to OTU, Operational Training Unit, which was at Chipping Warden near Banbury, and Wellingtons we were flying there, and that's where we got crewed up.
Just before we come onto the crewing up point, so you'd obviously done quite a bit of flying by that point. Were you enjoying the flying? Was it all that you hoped for?
Oh, absolutely.
Can you recall your first flight, for example? Was it?
Yes, it was. Well, it was great. Getting used to the stuff and the turret, and because you had only one gun was mounted in the turret, and also a camera gun, and yes, I enjoyed it thoroughly.
So there was still that sense of excitement about having.
Oh, absolutely. Flying,
yeah. So, Operational Training Unit. Can you? How the crew came together? How did they do that?
My course was a bit late, I think, that was probably because we missed out on some of the training because of the weather. It was still snowing up in Scotland when I was up there. It wasn't settling, but it was snowing, so it curtailed the training a bit. And so when I arrived at Chipping Warden, I didn't like it there much because we were in a Nissan hut. There were 3 Nissan huts in about a mile and a half up the road from the actual airfield. So there was no water laid on the lights or anything. It was terrible. Talk about living rough. Anyway, so we did that, and we got there. And when I got there, I reported in. And the officer that was on duty, he said, there's Pilot Officer Judd, he's waiting for a mid-upper. Could you go along and introduce yourself? So I bowled along, and he was there with the rest of the crew, apart from the flight engineer, because I'd already been crewed up, you see. So I just called out, Pilot Officer Darlow, this is me, and so we shook hands and all round, and I was in the crew. That was how it was done.
So he'd already got his 5. He'd already got his rear gunner for the Wellington.
That was Ken Banks, a Canadian, also a pilot officer.
Right, but because he was then now going to transfer to 4 engines,
the big stuff.
He needed the mid-upper as well.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how I got crewed up.
And was it could you describe the dynamic of the crew and the kind of people they were? Did you get on well together?
Yeah, I did. I was the youngest of them. The rear gunner was 33, would you believe? Sid Long, the bomb aim, I think he was 26. It was Bill Wells, Dennis Brown, the navigator, Bill Wells, wireless operator, Sid Long, the bomb aimer. And then from there, so since I was a bit late, so I only did more or less one flight with them, training flight, 1 or 2 flights. Then we got posted to a conversion unit, which was at Waterbeach, Stirling's. Well, when I saw that Stirling, it's fantastic, wonderful. And so we did our circuits and bumps, picked up our flight engineer, Dick Richards. He was 38. I was just turned 19. I was still 18 then. I was not quite 19. So he was twice my age. Our flight engineer. And so we did our circuits and bumps. From there, the gunners went to Marham for a week for an advanced gunnery course. Came back, and then we got posted to 15 Squadron.
Why were you so impressed with the Stirling? What was it about it?
Well, it looked aggressive. It was big. It looked aggressive because what a big undercarriage it had, and the nose was poking out and sort of defiant. I don't know. It was just wonderful, really. Mm. I knew there was of the Stirling, of course, because that was the first 4-engine bomber to come on stream in 1941, I think it was. They had about 3 of them posted to 7 Squadron. So anyway, that was that. And
can I just ask you a bit more about the training? Do you feel at that time that the bomber offensive is escalating quite substantially at this point?
Oh yes.
Did you have a sense that they were trying to get crews through training quickly to get them to operational squadrons?
No, I don't think so. I think the training all round was good, and obviously it doesn't take so long to train a gunner as it does, for example, a pilot, a navigator, and a bomb aimer. No, I judged the training to be good.
And as a crew, well, personally and also as a crew, were you keen to get onto operations?
Oh, absolutely, because that's. That was the end job, really, wasn't it? To do, this is what we were doing, training to do. Yeah. That's what we had in mind to do when we decided to volunteer for Aircrew.
Yeah. So, got posted to 15 Squadron. Approximate date that you arrived there?
May, sometime in May, I think. End of May. 43.
May 43. So that's right in the midst. Well, the Battle of the Ruhr is really picking up pace at that point.
Yeah, it was. It was around about the middle. Yeah, that's true. Yes.
Yeah. What were your first impressions of this operational squadron then?
Well, it was good. It was. I think we were 3 group headquarters at the time, and it was a good station, a pre-war station, of course. We were billeted in, not the actual barracks, but there was a row of cottages that had been taken over. So we were in one of those cottages, which was just outside the main gate. And it was quite comfortable, really.
Were you an all-sergeant crew or some officers in?
Yeah, no, we had 2 officers now. We had Jules Judd, the skipper,
yeah,
who was a pilot officer, and also Ken Banks, the Canadian. He was a pilot officer.
But did you all socialise together? There wasn't really an
well, of course, the officers were in the officers' mess anyway. Yeah, absolutely. We were together all day long at dispersal with the ground crew, and in the evening or whatever, in the local pub or in the Cambridge, we were always together.
Right. So May 1943, you'd arrived at 15 Squadron.
Yeah.
How long were you there before your first operation?
Well, a couple of days really. I almost did an operation. I was in the crew room. We hadn't done anything yet. We just sort of arrived, and I was in the crew room with another chap who was also a mid-upper and just joined the squadron. And the gunnery leader came in and said he wanted a mid-upper for that night for a pilot officer Hawkins. Apparently his mid-upper hadn't turned up or something. I don't know, it was a bit strange. Anyway, so I beat the other guy to it and put my hand up. And so I didn't go to briefing, but I waited outside with my kit and I spoke to the skipper, Hawkins. I said, I'm flying with you. And he said, oh no, my chap, whatever his name is turned up now, so we don't need you. They're all killed that night on Mulheim, yeah. So I had a lucky straight away. My luck was there straight away.
Good Lord.
Yeah, so that was the first incident. And then, of course, the usual drill was for your skipper to do a second dicky, which he did. And then we did, what did we do first? Mining. We did a mining operation off the Frisians, which was normal procedure, routine stuff. Drop about 3 mines, and then George did another second dicky, this time with the CO. So that was his stint done, and then we were flying as a crew anyway, and then we did another mining, and then we did a first land tow, went to Wuppertal in the Ruhr. So that was good, that was interesting. And nothing happened really, except that a bit of flak came through my turret, punctured a hole through my turret, brand new turret, and excuse me. So that was it really. So we done a good. That was a good target, well alight and so on and so forth. And then we did another mining trip across France to La Rochelle, dropped 10 miles off La Rochelle. And then what happened then? Oh, we did a couple of colognes and they were okay. And then we had a bit of leave, I think. And then when we came back, but before we went on leave, excuse me, we had a... there was no battle order up this particular day, so we were a bit all surprised that we called about 4 o'clock to report to the briefing room. So we wondered what was up, and so we bowled along there to the briefing room. And who should be standing there, not on the platform, but at one side, was Butch Harris. And he didn't often put himself about, he's a very busy man up in London. Anyway, he came down to speak to us and spoke about the general situation with Bomber Command and what we were doing and things were building up okay. And then he said, we're going to obliterate Hamburg. We're going to make a big job of Hamburg now. But before that, he said that we were going to use this new stuff called window. We'd had it for a couple of years or more, but the home defence people didn't want Bomber Command to use it because they were winded that the Germans would copy it, because the Germans already had their own stuff, similar stuff. But they didn't have the wherewithal to carry out the raids really at that particular point. So he said, we're going to do Hamburg, and he said, we're going to use this window. We'd never heard of the stuff. And he also said that Churchill wanted a film being made about Bomber Command's work to let the British people know what was going on with Bomber Command. And he said he wants it called The Bite a Bit, for obvious reasons.
The what, sorry?
The Bite a Bit.
The Bite a Bit?
The Bite a Bit, right. Yeah. So Oh, that's okay. Anyway, that was a jolly good chat from him. He's a good, Butch was a good bloke, you know. So we did the Hamburg. We're now into July, end of July, and we did the Hamburg raids. The first one, we used the window, and it was absolutely stunning, the effect that had. I was amazed, because Hamburg was allegedly the most defended city in Germany, with being a port and so on. And we were third wave. There were 700 of us on, and we were third wave incendiaries, carrying incendiaries. And when we got there, of course, the place was well alight. But the flak, there was some flak coming up, but it was very desultory and all over the place. And the searchlights were waffling about almost at ground level. It was an amazing sight. And so we just breezed through and bombed our markers, and that was it. And we lost, out of over 700 aircraft, we lost 12 that night, that's all. And they were plotted to have been on the periphery of the stream, so they got picked off. So it was astounding. And so that was a very good raid. But we were due to go the next night, apparently, to Hamburg. But because of the smoke over the city and so on, it was decided to scrub. So we went to secondary target, which was Essen. Now, Essen was right in the middle of what we used to call Happy Valley, the Ruhr, because all the armaments factories there, Krupps and everything. So we thought we were going to have a rough time there. But that turned out to be a brilliant raid, and I oboe marked, and that was a brilliant raid, and that was very successful. That was a major effort as well. Our losses were, although we had losses, they weren't as heavy as they would have been once more window was doing its job. And then we did, I think we stood down, I think. I've got all the records upstairs, and we did the second Hamburg, and although we had a few more losses there, it was still very good. It was a brilliant raid, and that was the first firestorm. Well, the Germans termed it a firestorm because it was really a fantastic. You've no idea what it was like, really, unless you'd actually seen it. This stuff going up. And so that was okay. We got coned over the target with some searchlights. They were just chancers, really. They weren't master beams. They were just waffling about, searching for something, and they just happened to pick us up when we were on our bombing run. Anyway, we got out of that okay. And so the night after that, we did Hamburg again, because it was done in 3 sections of the city, as you probably know. And so that was another brilliant raid. And on the way back from there, we were halfway home, and the Dutch coast was on our port side, and we were breezing along nicely, and suddenly a fighter flare came from nowhere, and I stern, and where the hell has that come from? And we knew what was going to happen because Bill Wells, our wireless operator, he used to tune into the German wavelength and pick up their chatter between their fighters, night fighters, and their ground control. So he came through the intercom and said, "Listen to the boys," and he put it through. We heard the chatter, and it got louder and louder. So obviously the fighter was getting closer to us. And then, as I say, suddenly this fighter flare came down. And I was unsighted because it was right of the tail plane was in my way, so I couldn't fire. It was just in the wrong position. Anyway, Ken gave it a long burst, which fell short because of the range, and it cleared off. It was 88. It cleared off. I don't know why it did that, but the funny thing was, he had to fly past the flare was gradually coming down, of course, and he had to fly past it, and he illuminated himself. We were going away from it, and he was coming, so he was illuminated. It was a most peculiar situation. Anyway, I suppose once he found out that we were awake, he wasn't going to chance it, and he cleared off. most peculiar. Anyway, that was a bit dicey over the sea, and getting caught in a combat. So we thought that was pretty good. So that was okay. And then the next night was we thought, well, we've done 4 in a week. We thought we'd be stood down, you see, but no. We went down in the morning, I think it was a Friday morning, and the blooming battle order was up, and we were on it again. 12 aircraft we were putting up that night. And the briefing was Remscheid in the Ruhr. So it must be one of the last targets of the Battle of the Ruhr. And never heard of Remscheid, where is it? So it's Remscheid and Solingen, and they steel works there, lots of steel works, they make engine blocks and all that sort of stuff. So we're off again. It's a fairly short trip really to the Ruhr, and so nothing happened. There was only about 260 of us on that night. It wasn't a major effort, and so we were on our bombing run, and the fires we were second wave. And incendiaries still, because we mostly carried incendiaries in 3 group, and we were on our bombing run. The fires were beginning to brew up, and we were on our bombing run, and the master beam flicked onto us. That was the intense blue light, radar controlled. And it flicked across our starboard wingtip. I reported it straight away, and in no time at all we had several lights on us, and because the flak started to come up, and they hit us immediately, and we went on fire in the fuselage on the port side, and we were still on our bombing run. Bomb doors were open, and we were making for our markers, and As a gunner, because in the mid-upper, you had a very good all-round view, and I couldn't see any fighters coming in with all this flak coming up at us. So I looked down, and I could see that there's flames. I heard them first of all, a different noise in my earphones, and the flames were roaring up the fuselage. So I thought I'll get out, see if I can do something about the fire. And the fire had sort of emanated from just behind the wireless operator. There was no move from Bill, so I think he must have been hit with this stuff that came in and put him out of action. Otherwise he would have been on his feet as well with a fire extinguisher. And so anyway, as I stepped down from the turret, there was a big explosion at the back, and I was hit. I got hit. I knew I was hit. And if I hadn't been hanging on to the ladder, this small ladder that came up to the mid-upper, it would have knocked me over. Anyway, I didn't feel any pain, but just at that moment, there was a whacking great big explosion up the front as well, and that was it. The aircraft went straight into almost a vertical dive, and I got pinned to the top of the fuselage with force of gravity. And I thought, well, that's it. We're never going to do. You can't move when you're in that situation. You just can't do anything. And I thought, well, that's it. I resigned myself. And then, blow me, the aircraft pulled out. The skipper, although they were all bad, they must have been badly hurt or killed outright up the front. The chaps up the front. He must have pulled it out. It couldn't have come out on its own. It couldn't have come out that dive on its own. So the skipper had managed to put it out and give us another chance. So of course I fell down to the deck again, and I was lying there. I was now very woozy by now, and I saw that the flight engineer went. He went out the back because the flight engineer used to put window out. So that was his job on our squadron. Him and the wireless operator to share the job between them. And so he missed the blast because he was behind a bulkhead putting the window out. And so he missed the blast of this shell bursting up front. And he he went past, opened the rear escape hatch and went. So I thought, well, time for me to go now. So when I went to get my parachute out of the rack, it had gone. So the bungee strap holding it in had broken with all this going on. And I thought, well, that's it again. So I resigned myself. I said, no, I won't give in. So I searched, and the parachute had slid down, and it got caught. There was a little step at the bulkhead up front, and it got caught there. So I went along there, got the parachute, and sat on the step made by the Bombay, fiddling about trying to put it on. And I saw the rear gunner come out. Now he'd been hit. I found out later he'd been hit in the leg with about 3 pieces of flak, but they'd gone straight through his left leg, so it didn't break any bones. So he came out, and I saw him go. And years later, when we contacted each other, he said, "You owe me one, Doug." He said, "because I helped you on with your parachute." Now I didn't know that. So you tell the state I was in. Anyway, he went, and then I was the last of the 3 out. And the aircraft, I bowed out, got out okay. Chute opened okay. And I landed in a village called Mannheim. And the aircraft crashed about 4 kilometres up the road from there, in a place called Bernawinkel, and it burnt out. I learned all this later. It burnt out over a period of days. Nobody came near it. The Luftwaffe didn't come near it, which was unusual because normally they pounce on an aircraft to look for equipment, stuff like that. So it was just left to burn, and the 4 members of my crew who were up front, they were just burnt to a cinder, or ashes really, and so their names appear on the Runnymede Memorial.
Right. Yes.
I was coming down okay, looking and drifting in the right direction. There was no moon, but it was a starlit night, and I looked down and I saw this wall coming up, about 6 foot wall. So I lifted my feet over the wall, and I landed in a little back garden. It was, I suppose, not much bigger than these 2 rooms together. And I did it was just enough room for me to land and do the usual landing and rolling over and so on before I hit the other wall. So there I am in this back garden, and I loosened my flying gear, parachute harness, took my Mae West off, and I was all over the place by now, I kept passing out. And because the parachute, I didn't do anything with the parachute, it was just hanging over the garden wall into the street. And I did get up and look for a door to get out, and I couldn't find one. Anyway, not long after that, I heard the all clear sirens go. I think this village was about 50 kilometres from the target. So I heard the all clear go, and the sound of voices and footsteps, and then I heard footsteps come around, and at the back of this little garden was a door, and there was a footpath that I learned later down there. So he came up and he called out hello, and I answered back, and he came in. He was a squaddy, a German Wehrmacht chap on leave, I suppose, and he helped me up, took me into this house. By now some of the villagers had come. There was a little crowd of them, and they came into this house, a little 2 up, 2 down cottage really, and he opened the front door and he went straight into the kitchen, one of those old, quaint old places. And the lady of the house, it turned out she was the lady of the house, shook her fist at me, but then they sat me down on a chair and loosened my clothing, my flying jacket and so on, and saw the hole that I was there. And so she got me a cup of water and made signs for me just to rinse my mouth out, not to swallow it. And they were all looking very apprehensive and worried, all these people. And there were some children there as well. And then 2 lads came in, I was about 15, 16 maybe, they had tin hats on. I suppose they were wardens. They're all doing the similar stuff there as we were doing over here, really. And they looked a bit worried, and they brought a stretcher in and put me on the stretcher, gently put me on the stretcher. And I mean, it was amazing, really, how that they treated me. And took me up a few yards up the road, put me on the pavement, knocked on a door. It was the village doctor. So he came out, and gave me an injection of some sort, put a pad on the wound, and his car was parked there. And he put me in the back of the car. They put me in the back of his car, and we drove off into the night. So after that, of course, I kept sort of losing consciousness and falling off the seat and so on. And that's eventually how I ended up. I don't know where it was, but it was daylight now, and I came one of those times when I was coming to, as it were, and the car stopped outside this house, and the steps up from the pavement to the front door. You knocked on the door, and somebody came out with a stretcher and took me into this house. And there was nobody. It seemed to be an empty house. Very strange. All these strange things went on, and they put up on the stretcher on the floor in the hall of the house, and there was a woman there. She had I can remember she had fair hair, tied back in a bun, glasses on, and she leant over me and asked me if I wanted a cigarette. I said. I shook my head. I didn't smoke anyway, and I passed out then. So I don't know when it was, but sometime later, the movement of the stretcher woke me up, took me outside, and put me in an ambulance that turned up, and they put me in the ambulance on the bottom shelf, and I heard this twangy Canadian voice, and it was my rear gunner. He'd come down. A place called, and been in hospital at a place called Stirling, where they'd dressed his wounds on his legs. But I didn't let on, although I recognised him, and he didn't know it was me because he hadn't been facing downwards, you see, so he didn't see me. He knew it was somebody, but he didn't know it was me. So we arrived at this hospital place together, just outside, about 3 kilometres outside Dusseldorf. This so-called reserve hospital, reserve lazaret, as they called it. And there I was operated on by a Polish doctor. And eventually he didn't find the flak, it's still in, I've still got it in there. But he was a good chap, and eventually I recovered. It was touch and go for a bit, but I eventually recovered and joined some other chaps in another part of this place. It was a bit rough and ready, this hospital, but there was I didn't see a German doctor. Once a German doctor, but no, they didn't touch me at all. The Germans. It was just the Polish, and there were some French prisoners there who were all just medical orderlies, really. And so I eventually recovered and joined some other chaps in the other room, including my rear gunner. And there we were until we got carted off to Dulegluft in Frankfurt, which was about August, September, about 6 weeks later.